Okay guys, welcome along. So this is a quick video and it's a nightmare of a journey. Okay, it's absolutely horrendous for two reasons. Number one is the awful weather. It was absolutely atrocious. And number two, it was the weekend, just after the weekend of the fuel crisis in the UK, where all the petrol stations had run dry. Now cast your mind back a few weeks. When I went up to Yorkshire, I did a video. It was called The Longest Journey and it was 106 miles. Well, this is the return journey on the Monday morning, okay? So I'm leaving the Airbnb, I'm heading back home. The weather forecast had actually been good, okay? But it turned over the weekend and it was absolutely appalling. On the Monday morning when I was due to leave, I had to leave because I had to get back. I had things to do. So I waited around for about half an hour to see if the weather would improve and it didn't. So I just thought, right, I'm going to go for it. So I'm heading down the lane and look at the weather. It's absolutely wet through, okay? I'm going to show you more about the weather as we go. But the big problem I had here was I'd used the scooter over the weekend, so although I'd put some fuel in it on the way up, I was now running low again. I was down to like 3 bars. And on these Royal Alloys, I'm not sure exactly whether the fuel gauges are accurate or inaccurate. So 3 bars showing on the fuel gauge. And I'm worried, right? Because the fuel stations, there was about 3/4 of the fuel stations had actually run dry, no fuel at all. And it's difficult to know which stations had fuel, which ones didn't. So I set off, I've got the sat-nav on the handlebars, and I've got all the fuel stations highlighted so I can see the fuel stations en route and try and get to one and fill up. So we're heading down the lane. We've ridden about, say, 2 miles here. You can see me wiping the water off the lens there. And I'm already wet through. Okay, so what am I wearing here? I'm wearing a leather jacket on top. I've got protective jeans on, and I've got a good pair of waterproof pants over the jeans. So my bottom half was relatively dry, but the top half I had a cagoule over the leather, and the rain started soaking in very quickly. Okay, since this video I've invested in a decent waterproof jacket, which I'll share in a future video. But you can see how wet it is here. The road was awash with water. There was standing water. I'm riding very slow. Behind me in the car, I've got my family following me in the car. Now, they'd been begging me to actually leave the scooter at the premises, chain it up and come back for it another day, which would have been the sensible thing to do. But I'm like, no, I'll test myself. I want to go for it. So they're following me in the car. But at this point, the rain was so heavy, you can see on the lens there. I know it doesn't make the best viewing, guys, so I do apologise for that. But at least it gives you a sense of how wet it was on this day. It was absolutely bouncing down. And I was forced to pull over here. So I pull over right into a big muddy puddle. I've got my family behind me in the car. And at this point, they gave me a real ticking off saying I should have a high vis. I shouldn't be going anywhere without a high vis. But, you know, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Anyway, we have a chat. I wave them on the way. I send them on the way. And I waited around a little bit just to see if the weather would ease, but it didn't. The skies were getting darker and it was getting grimmer. So I just thought, well, I can only get so wet. And as long as I'm careful, I'll be safe. So I waited around a few minutes and then I set off. Okay. So at this point, I'm pretty wet already. I've still got about 103 miles to go. And it's dark. Now, this is actually 10 o'clock in the morning, right? I know it looks like, say, 5 o'clock in the evening, but it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Lots of dual carriageways. I'm driving or riding relatively slowly, so there's lots of traffic on the journey just overtaking me. And of course, every time someone overtakes, you're going to get sprayed and wet through. You know, it's pretty grim. Now, this roundabout was the first fuel stop. I was thinking here, the sat-nav was showing me a fuel station off one of the roads off the roundabout. So I'm coming round the roundabout again, just making sure I've got the right turn. And by this point, my fuel gauge had dropped from 3 bars to 2 bars. It dropped down very quickly, right? So I had no idea how many miles I had left in the tank. And I pull off the road here, coming up to the fuel station. I see the fuel station sign, and in my heart, I'm thinking, yes, I've got fuel. I'm going to get some fuel. I pull into the fuel station, being very optimistic. And what do I see? I'm coming down this little slip road here into the fuel station. I see a HGV wagon coming towards me. I think, well, that's encouraging. He's just been in and got fuel, surely. But as I pull up, my heart sinks. Okay? My heart sinks. Now, bear in mind, North Yorkshire is quite a rural area. I'm pretty much in the middle of nowhere. There's lots of dual carriageways, but you're miles from anywhere. And I see these cones. The whole place has got zero fuel whatsoever. So now I'm panicking. I'm thinking, oh no, it's going to be 20 miles to the next station. I'm not sure whether I can make it. So my heart's sinking at this point. I'm wet through. I'm miserable. No fun at all, right? But this is scootering in the autumn in the British Isles, in the UK. It can be pretty grim. So I set off again, and you can see the water again now. What happens here? By this point, I'm pretty wet through. See the traffic, right? The traffic gets impatient because I'm only riding fairly slowly, so you get lots of traffic coming past. And look at the speed as well. Look at the speed of the traffic coming the other way. Look how quickly it comes on you. You can imagine just someone overtaking, getting it wrong. The other thing I had to think about here on this bridge, I remember this bridge, it was windy, right? The crosswinds across here were buffeting me around so much that I felt quite vulnerable, really. Quite vulnerable. You feel the scooter blowing around, you feel it moving. I mean, the scooter performed brilliantly, don't get me wrong. But in these conditions, you know, you are vulnerable. Good tyres on the scooter as well. So, of course, if you're going out in the wet weather, make sure your tyres are good. Make sure they're correctly inflated. Don't neglect the basics. So I'm coming up through a village here. Again, it's still wet, but I think by this point, the rain had just eased off a little bit. Okay. And I've probably done about 10-15 miles at this point. Now, what happened was very quickly, the fuel gauge went from 3 bars to 2 bars, and then from 2 bars to 1 bar, right? And it went down very quickly indeed. And I wasn't really sure now. I'm panicking even more. I'm thinking that went from 3 to 2 to 1 really quickly. As I came through this lane here, you see, either side we've got these high hedges. And it felt like I was in some sort of Stephen King movie. Like you've seen that film with the maze and the corn where they get lost in the field. It was like that. I was like, oh no, I'm in the middle of nowhere. God knows what's going to happen. Am I going to break down in the middle of these fields? And at one point I had visions of myself having to kind of, you know, break down. I thought I'd be waiting for hours for the AA or for someone to bring fuel to me. And I was starting to panic at this point. I was really panicking because I knew I was down to 1 bar. I knew that I had to slow the bike down. I was doing about 30 here, and it was a 60-mile-an-hour road, as you can see. So I'm slowing the bike down to try and save fuel. I've got traffic building up behind me, and I pull over slightly there to the left just to allow the traffic to pass. But again, look at the traffic coming the other way, right? It comes on you so quickly that imagine if someone was overtaking coming from the opposite direction and they get it wrong. You're brown bread, right? Very, very vulnerable. Brown bread, if you're not sure, means dead, right? So you've got to be so aware of the traffic coming the other way, so aware of any idiot drivers on the road. You've got to think that you've got to ride a little bit defensively and think that every car is a potential hazard and have your wits around you. Now, at this point, I'm really panicking because I'm thinking, I've been on the road for a while. I've not seen any fuel stations. The other problem I had was my sat-nav, the phone, although I've got a Samsung and it's meant to be waterproof and rainproof and so on, I was getting a message on the screen telling me that the charging point, the connector, which I had plugged into a power pack, had moisture in it. So although the phone is meant to be waterproof, it was telling me I had moisture in the charging port. So I pulled over, I checked the phone, checked I was on course on the sat-nav, off I go again. Okay, now, amazing, blue skies ahead, right? So part of me now is quite optimistic that I'm going to get home, I'm going to get safe. I passed this old fuel station here on the right. Now I realised it wasn't a fuel station. I pulled in. It's one of those fuel stations that's been turned into a mechanics, like a garage, repair garage. I pull in, I have a chat with the owner and I ask him, I'm begging him at this point, have you got any fuel? I just need a cup of fuel that I can get so I can get to the next fuel station. And he says, no, got none. Very, very, not hostile, but it wasn't overly friendly, let's say. Maybe I was like the 10th person that called in that morning. I'm asking him, where's the next fuel station? Because my sat-nav now was not working properly due to the moisture into the port on the phone. So he tells me that the next fuel station is about 18 miles in a different direction than I was heading. Right, I wanted to go straight down the road here. He's saying go over the crossroads. So I had to sit and have a little think. Do I go off course to try and get 18 miles to the nearest fuel station that he's telling me? Or do I try and stay on course and hope I hit a fuel station in less than 18 miles? Now, I stuck to my instinct. And I pull out here and I go straight down the road. Excuse me. A little frog in my throat. Now that car there, when I was pulling out the junction, I have a thing about always keeping eye contact with people at junctions, just so they know they've seen you. Eye contact is a great thing when you're the vulnerable one. Just make sure they've seen you with a little eye contact. Now, the sun's shining. At this point, I came over this bridge. Now, if you've watched the other video, the longest journey, the journey up here, you'll remember that bridge. And when I saw that bridge, I was like, yes, I know that I'm on track. I know that I'm heading back, because I was starting to panic and I was losing my bearings a little bit. But when I saw that bridge, I knew I was not far from Selby. Okay, now I pass another mechanics there, you see that? Slightly different one. I pull in here. Again, same thing, it's been turned into a garage like a mechanics. And this one was shut, it was closed. The door was pulled too. I have a quick look around, there's no fuel there. And now I'm thinking, I'm not even going to turn the engine off and ask, because they've probably got nothing. So I just bypassed it and off I went. And as I rode away from this, I remember thinking, what are you doing? You didn't even ask. The guy might have had some fuel that you could buy off him. And I'm riding away. And I'm thinking, you idiot, you should have stopped. But I just didn't want to take the risk of stopping the bike, turning the engine off, wasting fuel. So I carried on. And now I'm getting near the town of Selby in North Yorkshire. Okay. So I'm really hopeful there's going to be a fuel station here with some fuel. And pull around the roundabout. I'm coming into the town centre and I'm following the bus. And now I'm down. I know I've been on one bar for like a good few miles. Okay, so I'm panicking. But I'm thinking, at least if I break down now with no fuel, I'm in the town centre. I can pull over somewhere. I can go and have a coffee. I can keep warm. I've got the big abbey on the side there. I'm not sure if it's a cathedral or an abbey on the side, but really nice little town, an old market town. And I'm just optimistic that if I do break down, at least I'm going to be not in the middle of nowhere. So I'm following the route into the town centre. I'm scanning left, I'm scanning right, I'm looking for fuel stations, and I'm coming up this little flyover here. I get to the top, I'm coming down the other side, and what do I see in the distance? I see the signs for a fuel station, and I'm like, yes, there on the right hand side, it's a fuel station, it's got the lights on, and I see a queue of traffic queuing to get in. So I'm like, yes, I've got fuel. I pull in to turn right, I'm pulling in to turn right, and I pull in behind this car. Now I'm thinking, who's going to let me in when everyone else is queuing for fuel? Everybody else is in the same boat, everybody's panicking, everyone wants to get to the fuel pump first, so no one is going to let you in. I sit there for a couple of minutes and then I realise there's quite a few drivers turning in from the opposite carriageway, and they're gesturing to me that I need to go back. So I figure it out, and what it is, you had to go down to the mini roundabout here and join the back of the queue. How long was the queue? Well, you can see how long it is there on the right. Okay, so I'm thinking, right, I'm going to be right at the back of the queue. I've got like 30, 40 cars in front of me there. Now on a scooter, what do? Do you try and jump the queue? Do you shoot up the side and jump the queue and then risk getting abused and having been, being sent to the back of the queue again? Irate motorists, everyone was angry, everyone was irate, everyone was stressed. So I joined the back of the queue, and I think I'm not going to risk it, I'm just going to do the right thing and stay in the queue. So I'm stuck on the roundabout, I joined the back of the queue, I pull in, and I was waiting here altogether for probably about 40 minutes queuing for fuel. Gradually the queue starts moving forwards. You can see there I've taken my gloves off. My gloves were wet through, my upper body was wet through, I was literally saturated and cold. I get to the front of the queue, but it's still not over, right? Because you see they're directing you down the car park to the back end of this little mini industrial estate. So I have to queue again. I have to queue down to another turning point and then come back on myself. And there's all these cars in front, you see that? So I'm coming around now. And eventually I get to the pump and I'm like, yes! Now I didn't care at this point whether it was E5 or E10. I just stuck whatever they had in. I think they were out of the E5 super fuel, the unleaded, and they just had the E10. So I stuck the E10 in, which is fine because these Royal Alloys don't mind the E10. And then I leave and I'm like, yes, right, absolutely. I cannot describe the feeling once I had fuel, right? The panic was over. I had a full tank, so I put about 8 or 9 pounds in, which filled it up. And now I can open up the throttle, I can get up to full speed. And I was like, woohoo, off we go. Right, now I'm still at this point probably, I'm not sure how many miles, but probably about 70, 80 miles from home. I've got to go through Doncaster, I've got to go up the top over the top of the hills. But I'm like, I was so elated at this point, right? I can't describe the feeling. It was just pleasure. So I opened up, and you can see it's blue sky as well. So in the end, everything came good. But great experience to be under a little pressure. Great experience to ride in the rain. And the rest of the journey was pretty pleasurable and pretty enjoyable, right? So what did I learn from this ride? Number one, never ever take the weather for granted, especially if you're in the UK. Always prepare for the worst case. Always carry your waterproofs, right? I've since invested in a decent waterproof jacket and a high vis, which I'm going to share in a future video. I'm going to show you the pants I'm wearing, the waterproofs, which were really, really good and kept me very dry. So always be prepared for the worst weather in the UK, or maybe anywhere else in the world as well. And, you know, always plan accordingly. Fuel crisis. Could I have done anything different? Not really, no. It was just the situation I was in. And when you're in the wet weather, just always ride a little slower and a little safer. And just enjoy, right? Scooting can be done in all weathers, as long as you're aware and you're safe. And you allow your braking distances and things like that. Then it's all good. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a nightmare, but looking back now, it was an enjoyable nightmare as well. All right, and the Royal Alloy scooter performed absolutely brilliantly in the wet weather. No problems there at all. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching.